What's up, Packers Nation? This is Victor back again with another update here on Packers Nation Report, and today, we've got some seriously intriguing news coming out of Green Bay that could shake up both the offense and the defense before the 2026 season even gets going. But before we dive in, let me ask you something. Are you a real Packers fan? Because if you are, go ahead and smash that like button and subscribe to the channel right now. We're pushing hard to hit Packers and helps us to that goal. If you want real fan analysis, daily Packers news, and honest opinions from someone who lives and breathes green and gold, this is the place to be. Alright, let's talk about what's happening. Because right now, there are two huge stories developing around the Packers, and both of them could have a major impact on the roster heading into next season. The first one involves something that honestly caught a lot of people around the league by surprise. Teams are reportedly calling Green Bay asking about one of their young wide receivers. Now think about that for a second. The Packers have spent the last few years building one of the youngest and most explosive receiver rooms in the entire league. Multiple players in that group have flashed serious potential, and some of them are just scratching the surface of what they could become. But here's the problem. There might be too much talent in one room. According to league insiders, two young receivers have drawn trade interest recently. One of them is considered a core piece of the offense, a dynamic playmaker the team reportedly has no real interest in moving. The other one, though, that situation might be a little different. We're talking about a 24-year-old receiver with elite route running and separation skills, someone who has quietly impressed every time he's gotten meaningful snaps. Last season, he finished with over 300 receiving yards and 2 touchdowns, and if you look back at his rookie year, he posted 39 receptions for 581 yards and 4 touchdowns. Those numbers don't scream superstar yet, but anyone who watches the tape can see the potential is absolutely there. The issue is simple. There are only so many targets to go around in this offense. With so many young receivers developing at the same time, one of them might end up becoming the odd man out, especially since this particular player is heading into the final year of his contract. And that's where things get interesting. Several teams around the league, including a historic AFC franchise known for its physical defense, another team currently rebuilding around a young quarterback, and a rising contender from the Rocky Mountains, are all rumored to have interest in adding this young playmaker. Each of those teams is looking for another weapon on offense, and in the right system, this receiver could absolutely break out with a bigger role. So the big question for Packers fans is this: would Green Bay actually trade one of their promising young receivers? From a roster building standpoint, it wouldn't be crazy. If the front office believes they can't extend everyone, moving one player now could allow them to maximize value before his contract expires. But that's just the beginning of today's story, because the second piece of news might actually be even bigger. The Packers just pulled off a surprising player-for-player trade with another franchise in the league, and this move directly impacts the future of the defense under new coordinator Jonathan Gannon. In this deal, Green Bay sent away one of their key defensive linemen, a young player who played more than half of the team's defensive snaps last season and was widely considered their most reliable run defender. In return, the Packers received a veteran linebacker with a fascinating resume. We're talking about a defender who not long ago led the entire NFL in tackles, earned Pro Bowl honors, and even landed on the second-team All-Pro list. That kind of production doesn't come around often. The plan appears to be for this veteran linebacker to step right into the middle of the defense, lining up next to second-year standout Edgerrin Cooper as Green Bay transitions fully into a 3-4 defensive scheme. And if you read between the lines here, this move could signal something else. The Packers might be preparing for the possibility of losing Key Walker in free agency, where his market value is projected to be around $14 million per year. So rather than waiting and reacting later, the front office may have decided to secure a replacement immediately. But here's where things get complicated. While this veteran linebacker had an incredible 2024 season, his 2025 performance dropped off significantly, finishing with one of the lowest defensive grades among starting linebackers in the league. That creates a very real question for Green Bay. Was that decline just one bad season? Or is it the start of a downward trend as he approaches 30 years old? Because if the Packers get the all-pro version of this player, this trade could turn out to be a brilliant move by the front office. But if the struggles continue, Green Bay may have just traded away a young defensive lineman for a player whose best football is behind him. And there's another ripple effect here too. By moving that defensive lineman, the Packers have now created a clear need on the defensive front, especially at nose tackle, which means the team could be very aggressive in the upcoming draft trying to find a replacement. So Packers Nation, we've got two fascinating situations unfolding right now. A young receiver possibly drawing trade interest from multiple teams, and a bold defensive trade that could reshape the middle of Green Bay's defense. And trust me, once we reveal exactly who the players involved are, this conversation gets even more interesting. So stick around, because we're about to break everything down. Who could be traded, who just arrived in Green Bay, and what it all means for the Packers moving forward. And don't forget, like the video, subscribe to Packers Nation Report, and help us reach 2,000 subscribers. Now let's get into the details, Packers Nation. Apparently, multiple teams around the NFL are calling the Packers about our young wide receivers, and one name in particular might actually be on the trade block. And I'm talking about Dontavion Wicks. Yeah, this one might surprise some fans. But here's the real question, are the Packers actually considering trading one of their young weapons? And if they do, is this the right move for the future of this offense? We're gonna break down the rumor, the possible trade partners, the numbers behind it, and what it could mean for the future of Jordan Love and this offense. Alright, let's talk Packers football. The trade rumor, according to ESPN insider Jeremy Fowler, the Green Bay Packers have received trade calls about two young receivers, Jayden Reed, Dontavion Wicks. Now here's the important detail. While teams around the league are showing interest in Jayden Reed, reports suggest the Packers have no real intention of trading him. But the same might not be true for Dontavion Wicks. And honestly, when you look at the current situation in Green Bay's receiver room, it actually makes sense why his name is coming up in trade talks. The Packers receiver room is stacked. Let's be honest about something, Packers Nation. The Packers might have one of the youngest and deepest and wide receiver groups in the NFL. Right now, the offense already features players like Jayden Reed, Christian Watson, Romeo Doubs, Dontavion Wicks, Luke Musgrave, and Tucker Kraft contributing in the passing game. That's a lot of targets to distribute every week. And when you look at how Matt LaFleur's offense works, it's built around spreading the ball and creating mismatches, not feeding one superstar receiver. That's great for the offense, but it also means some talented players end up underutilized. Which brings us back to Wicks. Dontavion Wicks production. Wicks has actually been pretty efficient when given opportunities. In his rookie season in 2023, he recorded 39 receptions, 581 yards, 4 touchdowns. That's impressive production for a young receiver who wasn't the primary target. Then in 2025, his role shrank in the crowded offense, and he finished with 332 receiving yards, 2 touchdowns. Not bad. Oh, but clearly not a featured role. And that's the key point here. Wicks is talented, but he might be stuck in a system where he'll never be more than the WR4 or WR5. For some teams around the league, that's an opportunity. Teams that could trade for Wicks. 3 teams have already been mentioned as possible destinations. Pittsburgh Steelers, New England Patriots, Denver Broncos. Let's break this down. Pittsburgh Steelers. The Steelers desperately need more offensive weapons. They already have DK Metcalf, but beyond him, the receiver depth isn't exactly terrifying for defenses. Wicks could step in as a secondary weapon, and because of his route running and separation ability, he might actually thrive in a bigger role there. Sometimes all a player needs is more targets and more opportunity. New England Patriots. The Patriots just released Stephon Diggs, which means their receiver room suddenly has a massive hole. Now let's be clear, Wicks alone wouldn't solve their entire problem, but he could be part of a rebuild for that offense. He's young, affordable, and still developing, and exactly the kind of player rebuilding teams like to acquire. Denver Broncos. Denver might actually be one of the most interesting fits. Well, they already have Courtland Sutton, but they've been searching for a reliable number 2 receiver for a while now. Wicks could potentially fill that role. His route running, speed, and ability to create separation would pair nicely with Sutton's physical style. What do the Packers gain? Now the big question, why would Brian Gutekunst even consider trading Wicks? There are 2 big reasons. First, contract timing. Wicks is entering the final year of his rookie deal. If the Packers don't see him as part of their long-term plans, trading him now could bring back draft capital instead of losing him for nothing later. Second, roster balance. Green Bay has already invested heavily in young receivers through the draft. At some point, you have to manage the roster and redistribute resources to other positions. And let's be honest, the Packers may need help at edge rusher, offensive line depth, or defensive back, depending on how the offseason unfolds. A mid-round draft pick from a trade could help address that. My opinion as a Packers fan. Now let me give you my honest opinion here. I actually like Dontavian Wicks a lot. He's one of those players who doesn't always get the spotlight, but when you watch the tape, you see how clean his roots are and how often he creates separation. But the reality is this: if the Packers truly believe that Jayden Reed, Christian Watson, and Romeo Doubs are the core of the receiver room, then Wicks might be the odd man out. And if another team is willing to offer a valuable draft pick, I could absolutely see Gutekunst pulling the trigger. Remember, the Packers front office is very strategic with asset management. They rarely let value walk away. The bigger picture here is that Green Bay's offense is still one of the youngest in the entire NFL. And with Jordan Love continuing to develop, the Packers are trying to build a roster that can compete not just next season, but for the next 5 years. Every move this offseason is about long-term sustainability, and sometimes that means making tough decisions with talented players. But now I want to hear from you, Packers Nation. Would you trade Dontavian Wicks if another team offered a good draft pick? Or do you think the Packers should keep the receiver depth and let the competition play out? Drop your thoughts in the comments. I read every single one. Packers Nation, now we've got breaking off-season news that could have a huge impact on the Packers defense heading into 2026. The Green Bay Packers have just pulled off a player-for-player trade with the Indianapolis Colts, and this one is definitely going to spark some debate among fans. The Packers have traded defensive lineman Colby Wooden in exchange for veteran linebacker Zaire Franklin. No draft picks, no extra compensation, just a straight-up swap between two defensive players. But here's the big question, Packers Nation. Is this a smart move to strengthen the defense, or a risky gamble on a veteran coming off the worst season of his career? We're going to break down why the Packers made this move, what it means for the defense under the new coordinator, the risks involved, and how this could affect the roster going into the draft. But before we dive in, quick favor from all the Packers fans watching. If you love Green Bay Packers news, rumors, and real fan analysis, make sure you smash that like button and subscribe to Packers Nation Report. We're chasing an incredible goal of 2,000 subscribers, and every single subscription helps this channel grow. Alright, and let's talk Packers football, the trade details. So here's the deal. The Green Bay Packers and the Indianapolis Colts agreed to a player-for-player trade, sending Colby Wooden to Indianapolis, Zaire Franklin to Green Bay, and interestingly enough, no draft picks were involved at all. This is actually one of the more unusual trades you see in the NFL, especially right before free agency. Most deals involve draft compensation, but in this case, both teams had specific needs and solved them immediately. For the Packers, that need was linebacker. Why the Packers made this move? This move is directly connected to one name, Key Walker. Walker has been the Packers' leading tackler. He's also about to hit free agency, and the expectation around the league is that he's going to have a very strong market. Reports suggest Walker could command around $14 million per year on the open market. And the Packers front office, led by Brian Gutekunst, clearly didn't want to be caught off guard if Walker leaves. So instead of waiting, they acted early. By bringing in Zaire Franklin, the Packers now have a veteran linebacker who can step directly into the defense. The new defensive system, another huge factor here, is the new defensive coordinator. The Packers are transitioning to a 3-4 defensive system under Jonathan Gannon, who was hired after Jeff Hafley left to become the head coach of the Miami Dolphins. That change matters a lot. In this system, the linebacker roles are clearly defined. Mike linebacker, the leader of the defense. Will linebacker, more speed and coverage responsibilities. The expectation right now is that Zaire Franklin will play the Mike role. Edgerrin Cooper will stay at Will linebacker Cooper, who showed serious promise in his rookie season, now gets to continue developing while Franklin handles the communication and leadership responsibilities in the middle of the defense. And that's something Franklin has done his entire career. Zaire Franklin's resume. Now let's talk about the player the Packers just acquired. Zaire Franklin might not be a flashy name, but his resume is actually pretty impressive. In 2024, Franklin had a phenomenal season, led the entire NFL in tackles, Pro Bowl selection, second team All-Pro, that's elite production. He built a reputation in Indianapolis as a hard-nosed, downhill linebacker who thrives against the run and brings leadership to the defense. And leadership is something the Packers have been trying to build on that side of the ball for a while. Franklin also brings experience, which is important when you have a defense full of young players. But there's a risk now, let's be honest here, Packers Nation. This trade isn't without risk, because Franklin is coming off the worst season of his NFL career. According to Pro Football Focus, his 2025 grade was just 38.4, which ranked 87th out of 88 qualifying linebackers in the league. That's a huge drop-off compared to his All-Pro season the year before. So the question becomes, was 2025 just a bad season in a struggling defense? Or is Franklin starting to decline as he approaches 30 years old? He'll turn 30 years old before week 1 of the 2026 season, so the Packers are clearly betting that he can bounce back in a new system. The contract side, from a financial perspective, this move is actually pretty reasonable. Franklin has 2 years remaining on his contract, which could pay him up to $16 million total. For 2026, he has $6, $24 million base salary, up to $7 million total with bonuses, and importantly, there's no guaranteed money left in the deal. That means the Packers maintain a lot of flexibility if things don't work out. What the Packers gave up. Now let's talk about the player Green Bay traded away. Colby Wooden was actually a very useful piece of the Packers' defensive line. In 2025, he played 52% of the defensive snaps and was considered one of the team's best run defenders, so losing him definitely leaves a hole in the defensive front, which brings us to another key point: what this means for the NFL draft. With Wooden gone, the Packers now have a very clear need at defensive tackle, especially at nose tackle. In a 3-4 defense, that position is critical because it anchors the entire defensive line. So don't be surprised if the Packers target a nose tackle early in the draft, or look for a veteran run defender in free agency. This trade could be just the first move in a bigger defensive overhaul. Alright Packers Nation, let me give you my honest take as a fan. I actually like the idea behind this move. The Packers clearly didn't want to risk entering the season with a huge hole at linebacker if Key Walker leaves. Franklin gives them experience, leadership, and immediate depth. But the success of this trade really depends on which version of Zaire Franklin we get. If we get the 2024 All-Pro version, this could end up being a steal for Green Bay. But if the 2025 decline continues, then losing Colby Wooden could hurt the defensive front. So this is definitely a high upside, medium risk move. Now I want to hear from you, Packers Nation. Do you think trading Colby Wooden for Zaire Franklin was a good move? Or would you have preferred the Packers keep Wooden and find another solution at linebacker? Drop your thoughts in the comments. I love reading what you guys think. And if you enjoyed this breakdown, don't forget to like the video and subscribe to Packers Nation Report. We're pushing toward our goal of 2,000 subscribers. With your help, we're gonna get there soon. Thank you all for the support. This is Victor, and as always, go Pack Go!